Hey guys, and welcome back to the workshop. We are in the new Kingdom of Airsoft workshop, and this is going to be, I think, the second kind of tech disassembly video that I've done in this place. So today we have a Cyma G18C. It's an electric pistol, it's the AEP version. So this is probably one of the most popular AEPs on the market. It's cheap, and it performs reasonably well. It's obviously not quite as nice as the Tokyo Marui version, but for the money you pay, it is a nice little performer, and it does upgrade kind of quite well. So we're going to be disassembling it. I'll show you how to get into the gearbox today, and I'll kind of point out any little things I notice on the way. So first of all, we're going to need to take our magazine out, put you off to the side. Now we've got our selector here, so that's on fun time and that's on semi. So we're just going to push in the back of the slide here, and that just pops off. So while we're here, let's just take the outer barrel cover, the inner barrel kind of cover off. It's just a little kind of locating notch there and there. So that just corresponds with a little notch there and there to make sure it sits in nicely. So where to next? Now on the bottom here, you'll see this lovely sticker, and underneath it you can kind of just push down to see the indentations. So we've got our two screws in here. They're just a small Phillips head, and then this kind of, let's see if we get the light on it again. Yep, this one here, that's your motor height adjustment screw. So you can go ahead and just puncture through that sticker and pull it off. Now I suppose you could kind of nicely pry off the sticker or just take it off entirely, but either way. So we'll get those two little screws out there. I find the sticker kind of holds them on nicely at this point. And we've got a little pin just in here that we need to push out. So I'm just going to use a thin kind of 1.5mm Allen key, and that just pops out like that. Put you off to the side, and then our base plate just comes off. Nice and simple. Got our two screws there, and that is our motor height adjustment screw there. So the next thing we're going to want to do is take off these grips. Now this is one of the things I'm not a big fan of. You've basically just got to get a knife under these grips and then slowly tease it off like that, because these are held on with some nice cheap double-sided tape. Now the Tokyo Marui ones have you can kind of get in through this little hole here. You can't really do it on the Cymas, but especially on the USPs. Actually, the USPs have a little hole that you can poke through, but yeah, the Glocks are a little bit trickier. So we're gonna get in on this side, and come on, off we go. Sorted. So now we've got our two kind of grip panels off. Not going to be needing you anymore. So the next thing I usually do is just take off our kind of gearbox and hop cover here. So again, we've got two little Phillips head screws at the back, one on either side. And then we've got one on the front up here. Now these Cymas are a kind of slightly different configuration to the TMs, but it's just a slightly different layout, just with some of the little kind of notches here and things. Doesn't really matter, it's just a little bit different. Now, one of the nice things about the Cyma, compared to some of the older Tokiburui models, is just in here. I don't know if you can see it, just kind of underneath here, this little bit here. There we go. That little spring there helps keep our trigger bar down. So some of the older Tokiburui models on full auto, that trigger bar would slip off due to the vibrations. So the newer ones have a little spring, and Cyma, actually they just decided to include that there. So that's a handy little addition, and it does make sure that you don't have issues with with full auto just stopping after a few shots. So now we've got it to this point, what we're going to do is take out these screws here. So we're going to use my magic screwdriver and pull out these two screws, just like that. Chuck that back on there. Now this here, that's our nozzle return spring, so that's going to be under some tension. Whew, a bit more tension than I was anticipating there. It was exactly what I was trying to stop, obviously not quite well enough. So there is our nozzle kind of spring guide, and that is our nozzle return spring there. Now the Cymas actually have a much stronger spring than the Tokimuruis. Oh, we've still got a BB in there. So that's our nozzle. We're just gonna put that together like that. That's how it sits. And you can go off to one side. Now let's keep these parts together here. Just let you have a look at that spring there. So that just helps hold the trigger bar down. So yep, if that pings off, that's how it goes, just like that. Now, once we've got to this point, we are going to want to get these pins out here. So we've got one just at the back here, and then two along the front in the grip, and we're going to push them from the right hand side out to the left, because the friction kind of head parts of it are on the left. So we're just going to chuck you over there, push out this pin here, and off to one side. Now we are going to keep these pins separated, because these two pins here are one length, and then this pin and the pin at the bottom are a different length. So we are going to want to keep them separated, just so you don't get them mixed up. So now we have a pretty loose gearbox. This is going to be able to just pop out nicely. Now with this one, later on I am going to do a MOSFET installation, so I'm just going to cut these wires, because I don't need these to be intact. I'm going to replace the whole wiring loom. If you're not cutting the wires, well, I'll just show you. So there is the trigger spring here, the trigger pin here that holds the trigger assembly in place. Now the trigger assembly on the Glocks are kind of a two-piece assembly, left and right sides, and that's going to allow our hop assembly, it's built in to the trigger assembly. It's all one kind of unit with just a split down the middle. So we're not going to need this anymore. That's our battery pusher thingamajig. We're just going to take out the little tensioning screw, little tensioning spring rather. So it sits in like that and tensions the battery pusher. And that is going to allow us just to take all this out. So yeah, we can take this screw out the front here. So we're going to let you see it. So this screw here is what holds on the kind of quick detach battery connector, this whole assembly here. So once that little screw there is out, this just completely comes off. We can take our trigger arm out of the assembly. That's sprung at the back. That's what allows us to switch between full auto and semi-auto. So then we can pull our trigger assembly out from between the wires. And we're going to be replacing this barrel with a nice shiny PDI 601 barrel with an R-hop, and then reassembling it. So you can go off to one side. So at this point you can just pull this through, but seeing as I'm not going to need this assembly, I'm just going to cut those wires like that. Obviously if you plan on using this again, don't cut those wires. You can desolder them here, or strip this apart even further with the screws on the back, 3 screws on the back, and that'll allow you to just take out the plastic housing and pull through the wires with just the little kind of copper contact bars attached. So now we've got it to this stage, what we're going to do is just push the gearbox out the bottom of the grip, and we're done. So that is our full kind of disassembly, getting the gearbox out. And for those of you who don't know, who haven't maybe noticed, your safety is just this little, what's usually the slide release. Just the right hand one is your safety there. So that just pops back and blocks the trigger, and then unlocks it. So now that we have our gearbox all kind of out and sorted, we are going to have a nice little gander at, someone looks like they've sneezed in the gearbox. So this is the Cyma one, and it's filled up with the usual kind of cheap thick grease. I mean, someone's just gone over that with a grease gun and run it to let the grease kind of soak in, if you like. So let's take it apart. Now I am going to cut this wire just because I'm not going to need it again. But you guys who are planning on running maybe the Airsoft World kind of quick detach LiPo, or if you're just soldering on a little adapter to the front or whatever, then obviously you would want to keep these wires intact. But to make life easier for me, I'm not going to do that. So the first thing we're going to want to do is be very, very careful with these tabs. So these motor tabs here are extremely weak. They are, what are they, about 0.3 mil copper. They're very, very weak. I mean, if we bend it all the way around here, it's just going to snap off. So you don't want to be putting any tension at all on these little copper tabs in here. I'm actually just going to cut that wire even shorter so that I don't catch it on anything. So yeah, when you're working on that, just be really careful with those motor tabs. They are very weak. Now there are some upgraded motors that you can kind of tinker around with. I mean, I'm developing one at the moment. It's in the kind of the alpha testing stage. We've got 2 in guns up and running, and we're just going to run them and see how long they go for. But if you do want to play around with motors yourself, there's a brand of motor called ProMax. They're available in the States, and they are 370 type remote control kind of racing motors for cars, sometimes planes, I suppose, as well. So that's this kind of size, this type of motor is a 370 RC motor. So there are still some brushed 370 RC motors kicking around out there. Losi makes some if you can find any in stock. But yeah, Promax is probably the best bet. There are two types of the motor. There's the super torque one and the speed one. You're going to want to go for the speed one. The super torque one is just way too slow to be useful. We've got one running in a gun, and it's painfully slow. So even though it has all that extra juicy torque, it's too slow to be really useful. So now we've got these three screws out. What we can do is just rotate the motor slightly, and that will allow us just to slide off the motor bracket. So I'm just going to put you off to the side. And there we go. So that motor bracket just has a little pin that fits in that locating hole on the end bell there. So the next thing we're going to want to do is get these pins out, and this one here, these screws out even. So we've got one here. Now these are all Phillips head on the Cyma, but on the Tokyo Marui they are little tiny miniature Torx head. So 9-ball do this very handy hex lobe driver that gets the torque head screws. And this is designed specifically for the AEP screws. It's not going to be useful for much else in your life, but if you're doing a Tokyo Marui AEP, it is well worth picking one of these up. But Cyma have just used Phillips head, which is handy for us. So we're going to take these screws out. Now, before I forget, we're going to release the tension, if there is any. So this is the anti-reversal latch just here, just this little thingy. So we're just going to go in here and push that towards the motor, and that's going to release the tension, as you saw there. So now it's going to be less tension built up here, so when I take this apart, it's not going to fly away quite so much. So we'll just get this screw here, that one there, and the last one we need. You can take these two screws out if you just want a little bit of extra flexibility, but this is the trigger switch unit. So that's your shuttle just there. But we don't need to take that off the gearbox shell. So then we've got this screw here comes out. And I'm going to put these off to one side. So we have two long ones and two short ones. So let us see. Now we are going to want to go in with, where are you? Up on my magnetic string. We're going to want to go in with a nice kind of thin, just stop the camera wobbling there. There we go. Going to want to go in with a nice thin flat head. And what I'm going to do is, got all the screws out, so we're just going to hold it closed like this, just pry open front and back just a little bit, just enough to get our flat head in here, and that is going to allow us to hold the spring guide down. So then we can ease off the top of the gearbox shell, and then if we pull out the cylinder head, so you can either pull the spring guide out the back or pull the cylinder head out the front. There we go, nice and easy, and covered in nice snot grease. So once we've got this all apart, it's now detensioned. We've got our cylinder head at the front. We've got our piston assembly. Now these piston assemblies they're actually really high quality. For whatever upgrades you do, you don't really need to upgrade the piston. 9-ball and MAG and a few others do, and KM do some upgraded pistons. There's a full aluminium one, which is nice if you're doing a power build and you really want some nice reliability, but if you're upping the speed, just stick with the stock Cyma or Tokimarui piston. PDI do an excellent quality piston head that is nicer than this. You can see there's just a little bit of damage, kind of a little bit of wear on this. So we're going to replace that. Let's put it here so you can see. There are, as yet, no upgrades to the cylinder head, but you can put a little bit of Teflon tape around here. Just be sure that you don't get any in the gearbox and kind of trim it off nicely to increase the air seal. And myself and Airlab are working together to make little Sobrethane kind of damper pads that will fit in here. So hopefully they'll be available kind of reasonably soon. So we've got our cylinder. This is a full cylinder, very nice. The Tokimarui ones have a little port in them, which does reduce the air volume a little bit. Got our spring. Now the Cyma ones are kind of, they're okay, they're reasonably decent. Eagle 6 make probably the best upgrade springs for our AEPs. In terms of the cylinder, PDI do a ported upgraded version made of steel. It's really high quality, but if you want the full volume, you're going to need to go with the 9-ball. It's a brass coated one. So it is quite nice. I usually give it a little kind of once over with some 2500 grit paper on the inside, just to make it a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer. Got a spring guide here with a little kind of rotating washer to stop the spring wearing away. The plastic spring guide. So PDI probably make the nicest upgraded spring guides. It comes with a bunch of washers, so you can pre-compress the spring to increase the FPS, which is nice. Now we have got our tappet cam. 9-ball do a nice upgraded version of that, so that just sits in there. We have got our tappet plate. Now the Cyma ones are pretty decent. 9-ball do an upgraded one of this as well. The usual failure you'll see with this is just the head snapping off there. So yeah, if you do ever experience a broken tappet plate, 9-ball do a nice replacement for that. So this is our cutoff lever here. So that's the cutoff spring. This is our cutoff lever. And that sits in just like that, with the spring just there. So now we are on to our bushings. So there's one sitting over there. So we've got our plastic bushings. So that's our sector gear. Now the Cyma gears are pretty decent quality, and these are sintered steel or steel alloy, whatever metal they put in these. But I found the Cyma gears to be stronger and a little bit more reliable than the Tokimarui gears. So if you've got a Cyma, just leave those gears where they are. They're pretty decent. So this is our spur gear, or one of our kind of 2 spur gears or step gears. So that one goes next. And then this one here with our bushing. There we are. And then our bevel at the bottom. So bevel at the bottom with our bushing. And then our anti-reversal latch. So I'm now pretty much covered in grease. So that's our anti-reversal latch. The spring just, I don't know if you can see that, just pops out like that. It's just a standard anti-reversal latch. It's got a little notch on the top for the kind of the hooked end of the spring to catch around, which is nice. Now some of the cheaper AEPs have little plastic anti-reversal latches, and some of the older Cyma ones have plastic anti-reversal latches. You're going to want to replace them pretty quick smart. Now these plastic bushings are not so great. So I would definitely recommend upgrading them. 9-ball do some bearings, which are excellent, but you are going to want to file or ream out these bushing holes so that you don't have to force the bearings in, because if you force the bearings, you kind of stand quite a high chance of damaging them, and then they're going to fail. 9-ball also do bushings, as do a few other guys. PDI do some kind of much nicer quality plastic bushings. So yeah, there's plenty of options there. The last thing to kind of mention is, let's get this motor out. So we're just going to twist it around, pull it up at the front, and out she comes. So there is an O-ring. Now this one's pretty mangled. It's all a bit squished, so we're going to replace that. So that is just an O-ring that sits around here, and the idea of the O-ring is to, certainly on the Tokyo Marui ones, the O-ring goes around the screw and stops the screw from working loose. The Cyma one is covered in thread lock, so they probably just put the O-ring in there, maybe to dampen the vibrations, or just because Tokyo Marui do it. So we've got our pinion here. Now if you're going to be working on the motors, a lot of the clone ones have a D-shaped pinion. Not sure if you can see that there, but that does have one flat edge to it. So a lot of the, like the Cyma, the Well ones have D-shaped pinions. Tokyo Marui have a round pinion, and you're going to want to get that off if you're working with the motors. So a little bit of heat, little kind of blowtorch on there, and these ones usually just come off. They're held on with glue or thread lock or whatever. With the Tokyo Marui ones, you're going to need a specialist tool to get that off. So I'm just going to nip over to the other side of the desk. And we're back to grab our pinion tools. So this is the pinion removal tool from a company called Hudi, or Hudi, however you want to pronounce that, the European company. And there are a few other guys that make these tools, but Hudi makes some of the highest quality ones. So that's our pinion removal tool, and that is our pinion installation tool. So this one's been kind of used quite a lot, but this little pin here is spring loaded, and it's just such a nice quality tool. So yeah, that's what to look for if you're going to be working on the Tokyo Marui motors. And yeah, so that's us pretty much fully disassembled. I'm going to clean this up and start work on the upgrades. We're going to replace the bushings, give it a nice clean polish, shim it all up nicely. We've got a new piston head going in, a new spring going in, and then the MOSFET and LiPo conversions. So one last little note to put forward. These are the batteries. Now this is a brand new one, so I'm gonna have to open this up very carefully. So these LiPos are available from Hobby King. The kind of international and the European shop, sometimes the UK shop, have these in stock. It's a 7.4 volt LiPo. Don't need a warranty, so let's get rid of that. Yes, I've read the instructions, thank you. So this is available from Hobby King. It's a Turnigy Nanotech 300 mAh 7.4 volt LiPo. These ones, there's two versions of these available. There's the 35 to 70C and then the 45 to 90C. So because of the low capacity, we're going to want this 45 to 90C where possible. The 35 to 70, it will still work. It does still work. It just gets a little bit warm after a few kind of bursts of full auto. So this is a JST connector, and what I'll be doing is putting a little JST connector onto the end of the MOSFET. So this is a SW Lynx clone. The SW Lynx is available from Extremefire, and over in the UK, Airlab make this excellent kind of version of the SW Lynx. So we're going to put a JST connector on the end, and that is going to allow us to just plug that in. That just sits nicely like that underneath the barrel. I mean, it's like it was designed for the AEPs. So yeah, I hope that's been helpful for you. If you have any questions, just chuck them below, and I'll keep an eye on my notifications and come along to help you guys out. So yeah, we'll see you next time.